Oh, it's now March. Another New Year's celebration passed us by, imparting another fleeting wintry season as we fought through the urge to freeze. After sending out a message to the guard station outside of Goryokaku, we attempted to head back inside to beat the blizzard when...
まさか貴様らがまだ生き残っていたとはな。
Oh no! I know that voice.
ご苦労だったな、バンケ。よく我が妻の護衛を無事に務め上げた。褒めてやらぬでもないぞ。
風間、それとあの時の。
An icy wind whistled between us when...
そこの男、こんなところで一体何をしている？
One of our soldiers, bundled tightly in a warm coat, noticed the disturbance and aimed his gun towards Kazuma.
見かけない顔だが、敵方の患者か。ならば。
ダメだ！それ以上近づくな！
As soon as Souma screamed out, Amagiri jumped out, kicking his foot against a layer of hardened snow to gain momentum before lunging towards the soldier with his arms outstretched. Unfortunately, there was nothing we could do. Amagiri chopped the back of his neck in one swipe, and the snow plopped as the soldier fell.
ご安心ください。人目につくと厄介なので気を失わせただけです。
我々の目当てはその女を見だ。その娘をおとなしく引き渡せ。貴様ごとき雑魚と遊ぶ意味はない。見逃してやる。
断る！
なんだと？
お前などに雪村先輩を引き渡すわけにはいかない。
鳥羽伏見の戦の時のことを忘れたの。たった1年前のことだぞ。貴様ごとき非力な打剣風情がこの俺に勝てるとでも思っているのか。
何度も同じことを言わせるな。この人、お前に渡すつもりはない。
Souma reached his hand over the hilt of his blade and unsheathed it, digging his feet into the snow as he got into an offensive stance.
先輩、下がっていてください。
But, Souma...
お願いします！
I hated his frantic warning the second time. Souma glanced over at me with his peripheral then. He kicked at snowy ground, charging towards Kazuma with his sword raised in the air. The wind around them whipped into an icy cyclone as their blades clashed together, the sound of which thundered around us louder than cannon fire.
たった1年やそこらで実力の差が縮まると思うのか。
Each of Souma's slashes were anticipated well in advance by Kazuma, who sidestepped and parried the path of Souma's sword effortlessly. Kazuma grinned sadistically, then... The tables were turned and Souma struggled to keep hold of his blade as Kazuma swiped at him in blistering speed, relentless in his aggression. Souma did his best to deflect all of the attacks, but... He raised his arms too high, and Kazuma exploited this opening by smacking the bottom of Souma's hilt, and his sword flew nearby into a sheet of frost. Souma! I couldn't let myself watch helplessly from the side, so I drew out my kodachi and ran towards Kazuma. But I was blindsided by Amagiri, who slinked behind me and restrained my arms together.
行ってはなりません。
Hanase! I'm not going anywhere with you!
この雑魚とこれ以上一緒にいてどうなる。遅かれ早かれ命を落とすことになるぞ。
Kazuma pointed the sharp tip of his sword at Souma's throat, poking at it slightly to draw a bit of blood. If Kazuma had planned on murdering Souma in cold blood, with or without my consideration, then I might as well do the desperate thing. I put my tongue between my teeth, fighting hard to split it open, so I could choke on my own blood.
何をするのですか。
Amikiri took quick notice of my plan and hastily pulled my chin down to stop me.
風間、そこまでです。あなたは貴重な女鬼を目の前で死なせるつもりですか。
なんだと。
Kazuma's face warped in astonishment.
先輩。
Despite his tenuous position, which was made tougher by the frost, Souma tried lifting himself with one arm, tilting his head up to scream out my name.
この者がそこまで大切か。非力なまがいもの風情が。
He matters more to me than you ever will. If you're going to kill Souma, then you'd better accept that you're killing me too. I stared Kazuma directly in the eye. Their sadistic threats paled in comparison to the terrifying thought of losing Souma, and my life would be forfeited without him beside me. Kazuma scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief.
どうします、風間。我々のせいで貴重な女鬼を死なせてしまったとなれば、同じ鬼たち。特にあの痩せの女鬼からそしりを受けるのは避けられませんが。
こんなもの所詮は茶番に過ぎる。
Kazuma muttered nonchalantly as he placed his sword back into its sheath.
どういうことだ。
鳥羽伏見の戦の後、八瀬一族の長からお叱りを受けましてね。我々が今後もあなた方の意を無視して付きまとい続けるつもりならば、今後鬼社会から追放されはぐれ鬼となることも覚悟しておけと。
Sen said that?
もしお前が己の意に反してこの場にとどまっているのであれば連れ去るつもりだったが。
Do you see me being treated like a hostage, Kazuma? Bitch.
このような犬ごときにほだされるような愚かな女にはもはや愛想が尽きた。時代の流れに取り残された犬どもと勝手にのたれ死ぬがいい。
As scathing as Kazuma's indicament had sounded, I intercepted as a gesture of mercy that Kazuma had relented his position and chosen to let us go.
行動が新選組の羅刹たちに殺されたことは知っていますね。
Oh. Yes.
この世に残っている羅刹はそこの彼とミキというあの男の2人だけです。
ミキはまだ生きているんですか。
甲府で戦ったあの時、不意をつかれて取り逃がしました。彼は新選組に深い恨みを抱いている様子でしたから。
Amagiri, weren't you the one in charge of killing Miki? And you didn't do it? That is surprising. How the hell did he get away, huh?
そう遠くないうちにここに現れるでしょう。
ミキが
我々はすでに薩摩藩との関わりを絶った。こうして貴様らの前に姿を現してやることももうあるまい。
With that, Kazuma nodded, and Namagiri shot us a conciliatory smirk as they stepped away from us. A gust of snowy wind swirled around us, and the two demons vanished into the cold, hazy mist. Souma, are you okay?
平気です。これくらいの怪我ならすぐ治りますから。先輩こそ大丈夫ですか？口元に血が。
Souma thinned his eyes out of concern, licking his thumb before using it to wipe the damp spot of blood from my attempt to bite through my tongue. I'm alright too. My tongue will seal itself soon.
平気じゃないでしょ。本気で死ぬつもりだったんですか？俺のために。
Well, it's like I had said earlier, Souma. If I lose you, then life isn't worth living for me otherwise.
そんなのダメです。絶対に。
Souma wrapped both his hands softly around mine, grazing the back of my palm with his fingertips. Despite being surrounded by a mighty blizzard, I felt warmer than ever before, confronted by his loving hands clasped around my own.
もし俺が死んだとしても、先輩だけは絶対に生き残ってくれないと。俺は何のために戦うのかわからなくなってしまいます。
Souma. A white vapor floated from his lips. Part of me felt love, but mostly, I felt foolish for offering Souma, offending Souma, hoping that he knew how much I valued him. If a time came, like Souma has suggested, that I lost him, then my heart would be held captive, left in an impenetrable purgatory with no escape. I built a fantasy around the idea of growing old with Souma, which made anything else a hollow pursuit. Souma checked up on the collapsed guard, and we propped him up before trudging back to Goryokaku. There's a Miki somewhere. Now it's April. Oh no, winter's gone. April 1869. As springtime emerged, the frost making Ezo a somewhat inhospitable tundra had begun to melt, making conditions tenable for the Imperial fleet.
よし、そんじゃてめえら、そろそろ出発するぞ。敵の鋼鉄を奪えば戦況をひっくり返せるだろうし、今後の交渉も有利になるはずだ。
Ironclad, the Imperial Army's flagship, it is a state-of-the-art ship heavily fortified by iron plates on all sides.
新政府軍の奴らに目に物を見せてやろうぜ。はい。
Both of you be careful, okay? I will await your return and pray that it is safe and swift.
はい、もちろんです。
先輩は本当心配性だな。俺たちが新政府軍ごときに殺されるはずねえじゃねえか。ま、分取った船で戻ってくるから待っててくれよ。
よし、そんじゃ行くぞ。
All of the able-bodied troops under Hijikata-san's command marched towards the harbor. As I watched them shrink in the distance, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread fester inside of me. What good were prayers against the force of a massive warship? For most of those men, I'd assumed that they had never seen a black ship in person before. It was massive, enough to house several platoons twice over, making their task a daunting one. Try as I might, I could do nothing to shake the pervasive sense of dread. The longer I stood there, the more potent it became. It was a premonition not unlike what I had felt before the Battle of Toba Fushimi. Oh boy. I stood at the edge of the harbor, listening to the sea beat against the wood underneath my feet. Finally, I saw the rowboat approaching. Hijikata-san, Souma, I'm so glad to see you guys safe. How did everything go?
作戦は失敗だ。鋼鉄は手に入らなかった。
Blood, soot, and exhaustion covered their worn faces, and my heart sank into despair. As the men took turns stepping back into the dock, I noticed someone was absent. Where's Nomura? Souma's silence told me everything. I felt dizzy, and I felt ready to lose my balance as my knees wobbled in anticipation.
野村は亡くなりました。立派な最後でした。くそ！
Nishikata cried out in frustration, kicking the dock with his boot hard enough to shatter his toe. Nomura was the first one to promise me that they would return promptly and safely. But Nomura was the first to go. His laughter echoed in the space left behind by his lively soul. I cannot cry. I repeated this, but my tears had plans of their own.
先輩。
Souma watched me break down and wrapped his arms around me, and I sank into his chest. Later that evening, I was battling a bout of insomnia, so I prodded Souma awake to describe the details of the failed mission as it had happened earlier.
先輩もご存知だと思いますが、俺たちは3隻の黒船で敵艦に近づきました。
Hijikata-san, Souma, and Nomura had boarded the Kaiten Maru, an observation vessel that was not equipped to engage in seaside combat. Kaiten Maru, a warship owned by the shogunate in which Enomoto took it to Ezo. He put Hijikata and the men on his battleship and joined the Miyako Bay naval battle. Fate had other ideas, and a storm suddenly broke out, causing one of their vessels to sink and the other to experience technical malfunctions on board. Realizing that turning back would only cost them further, he pressed the K-10 Maru forward, using it as a primary vessel to commandeer the ironclad. Over the course of the next day, their plan fell apart. The Kaiten Maru hoped to travel in the Vale of Morning Dew. Oh god. The Kaiten Maru hoped to travel in the Vale of Morning Dew as cover, and made their gradual approach.
よし、作戦成功だ。切り込むぞ。
待て野村。切り込むなら羅刹の俺の方が敵役だ。悪いが、ここは俺にやらせてもらうぜ。なぜ？
そんなの決まってるだろ。気づいちまったんだよ。ここが俺の目指してた道しるべだったな。
Souma described Nomura's expression as serene as he led his men into the deck of the ironclad. He felt speechless watching his friend become a bold, courageous leader in front of his eyes. As our troops hit the deck of the ironclad, they were met with immediate resistance.
この後に及んで刀での切り合いとは時代錯誤だ。撃て！
Souma expected to hear a row of rifles fire off, but the Imperials unveiled a Gatling gun, which ripped our men apart in a matter of seconds. The deck of the ironclad was coated by a torrent of fresh blood from our wave of troops who stood no chance against the hellish storm of bullets. Yep! Holy shit. Nomura stood no chance. The Shinsengumi had no chance. The Shogun had no chance. Nomura, however, was not deterred. Nomura was not giving up. Even after being riddled with bullets and soaked from the blood seeping through his clothes, Nomura lifted himself up from the surface of the deck. And then the officer waved his hand once more. Nomura mustered his remaining strength and began charging directly towards the Gatling gun. Souma leapt into the air, hacking down the soldiers who had gunned down his precious comrades. Then Souma dropped a woven rope at the other end of the dock and called out to Nomura to grab his attention and get him out of harm's way.
Nomura! その縄に捕まれ!
A deluge of blood flowed from out of his bullet wounds, dripping at his feet with each pained step. With both of his hands clasped tightly around the rope, Souma readied himself to climb down, but before he could, Nomura used his remaining strength to sever the rope.
Nomura!
お前までこっちに降りてきてどうするんだよ。ここでお前が死んじまったら雪村先輩が悲しむだろうが。
野村！お前何をするつもりだ!
Souma's throat went hoarse from how loudly he screamed at Nomura, but it was no use. The Kaiten Mara's crew, realizing the futility of trying to take the ironclad, began pulling away from it.
己死に損ないめ! 奴らを逃がしてはならんぞ!
Imperial troops scuttled around the ironclad's deck and prepared to fire their rifles at the Kaiten Mara.
そうは行くかよ。新選組はな、敵に背を向けちゃいけねえんだ!
As Nomura deliriously pulled his wakizashi from his sheath, he drew the ire of the Imperial riflemen. Wakizashi, too short to be a full sword, but too long to be considered a dagger, the wakizashi was also known as a companion sword. It was generally paired with a longer blade. All of them took aim and fired at once. Souma said the bullets had rinsed through him. The cumulative blast of the gunfire flung Nomura's body into the air before he splashed overboard. As his body descended from the ship's starboard side, Souma said that Nomura's eyes met with his. Even in the cups of death, his beloved friend managed to eke out a smile before crashing into the sea.
Nomura!
The enormous wave swallowed Nomura's body, and they were unable to recover it. Let's take a moment for our dear Nomura. Oh god. Souma's voice trailed off toward the end, and I felt speechless, rubbing my hand on the small of Souma's back as he trembled in our bed. He was in mourning, struggling to steady his shoulders.
すみません。先輩の前で落ち込んだ顔なんて見せたくないんですけど。今日だけは無理みたいです。
I gazed into his eyes and shook my head. Souma has shouldered the burden for so long. He must have felt somewhat obliged to be the stronger one, but this time it was my turn. Would you rather that I let you be?
いえ、そんな。
Just after he'd answered me, his head cocked back. It is time for round 4. Souma?
平気です。ですけど、先輩、やっぱり外に出ていてもらえますか?
He attempted to maintain a semblance of calmness, but hundreds of sweat beads dripped from the top of his forehead, and he clutched his hand over his heart. It was a bout of bloodlust, and I knew that I had to do something. I chose to, and say it with me now again, we give him blood. Although he just asked me to step outside and leave him to suffer on his own. I'd seen this happen many times before, and leaving him alone could be the difference between life and death. Without asking, I slid my kodachi from out of its sheath, biting my tongue as the sharp edge stung my delicate palm. My hand shook as the blade oozed from the slight cut. My hand shook as the blood oozed from the slight cut, and there was a sort of strange pleasure I'd taken in seeing the droplets slide down my wrist. Souma, you need blood. Take me. It's yours. You can't refuse me. At first, Souma kept his somber gaze fixed upon the floor and hesitated to answer. Then...
わかりました。
He covered my eyes with his right hand and began vigorously smacking his lips on my palm. Really, you could have chosen any other words besides smacking. And I got onto my tiptoes to keep up with him.
先輩、気づいてたんですよね。俺が投げやりになってたこと。
His whisper tingled the inside of my ear. Although he was in mourning, he couldn't let himself succumb to both his madness and his grief. A storm ravaged inside of him, and I had an inkling that losing his best friend at such a dire time had thrust him into a crisis.
とても優しいけど、ある意味厳しい人ですね。先輩は。 答えをせかしたりはしないけど、自暴自棄になったり投げやりになることは絶対に許してくれない。そんな なただから俺は好きになったんです。
My heart fluttered, both from his sincere words and the intimate pleasure of being used by Souma. It lit a fire inside of my heart, trickling down through the pit of my stomach and into the tips of my toes.